Every little bit counts. Yes, it's a YouTube challenge in the month of August, but it's truly way more. It's a mindset that can carry you throughout your days. This week has been a busy one for many of us, myself included. So today I'm going to share my little bits of food preservation in hopes that it might inspire your little bits along the way. Today I'm canning 2 brand new recipes jam-packed with garden fresh produce. So let's get started. Every day there are little tasks in our lives that can move us forward or keep us stuck. And today the inspiration comes from Jessica over at 3 Rivers Homestead for putting on the August Every Little Bit Counts challenge, where she inspires us all to try to do small bits of food preservation every single day so things don't get stacked up on you and you don't have way too much on your plate at one time. Well, today I'm going to share with you my Every Little Bit Counts as I stepped out into my garden, which I hadn't been to in a few days, as you can see, and I grabbed all the produce that was ready to come inside. Now, one thing I have promised myself personally this year is that I'm trying to preserve everything that comes into my home within the first 24 hours to make sure that I'm keeping it at the peak of freshness. Now, as a result, sometimes I will admit I do find myself looking around thinking like, I'm too busy today or I don't have time to put that away tomorrow. So I'm going to let that go one more day. So I'm not sure if the end goal of my overall personal challenge is going to be successful or if I'm just prolonging the procrastination by not bringing it in before I'm ready to put it up. Isn't it funny how that happens sometimes? Like our absolute best of intentions, which is to put food up as fast as possible, turns into maybe giving it one more day in the garden. I can tell you for now, I have maybe had 1 or 2 green beans go just a little far, which you'll see me pull out here as I'm working. But for the most part, my tomatoes are beautifully ripening on the vine. My cucumbers are turning out absolutely delicious, and I'm really happy with this result. I will also say, I'm not sure where you're located, but where I am, we had a couple absolutely gorgeous days this week with the weather giving us the best break that we've had in a long time, dropping down into the low 80s. So I was able to jump out in my garden, which always makes it way more enjoyable when you're not just absolutely drenched in sweat to get a job accomplished. Okay, so for the overall plan today, I am going to make a recipe that you all actually suggested to me last time I was putting away my green beans. I am not a fan of just regular canned green beans, as I talked with many of you about previously. I don't like the texture, but the recipe that kept coming up in the comments was to make some dilly beans. Now, my family absolutely loves dill pickles and green beans. So this sounded like a natural complement to what we usually have here at the house. Now, if you are looking for specific directions and the full ingredient list, make sure to grab the all new Ball Big Book of Canning. I will link the one I have down below. Again, I love the spiral format so I can lay it out flat and not have to worry about pages closing. But either way, it has a lot of absolutely gorgeous pictures and delicious recipes. So this is dilly beans coming from All New Big Book of Canning. And to get started, what you need to do is cut off the stem ends, at least, of your green beans. I go ahead and cut off both simply because it's quicker than taking the time to look at every single green bean and decide which end is which. And if your beans have a long string down the middle, you need to do that as well. Once you have the beans prepped, then you need to make a quick brine. Now, to the brine, it is salt, vinegar and water, of course, and a little bit of crushed red pepper. I think this flavor combination is going to be awesome for my family because in the jar specifically, we're going to put a little bit of dill and a clove or 2 of crushed garlic for each one. So overall, I think this one is going to be an absolute hit for my crew. Now, one thing I did not show you in advance was prepping your canner. So if you're using a water bath canner over on the stove, you do want to get your jars in and your water simmering before you start all the rest of the details. But I personally am using the Presto digital canner, so it warms the jars for me. I got this set up before I started on the other tasks, so it was over here just waiting for the time to go ahead and add all the ingredients. Now, as I mentioned, this takes 2 cloves of garlic as well as it said 2 sprigs of dill, but I asked ChatGPT to do the math for me on that and go ahead and convert that to dried dill because I didn't have fresh dill. So that's what you're seeing as I'm processing all of these jars. Now, the trick here is to get your green beans in tight, but still allow all the brine to go down, of course, and for the bubbles to not get trapped down below. So I will debubble really good here in a little bit, but I really tried to shove as many green beans as I can, as tightly as I could into each one of these jars. The main reason is if you don't, you're going to use way more brine than you think. I typically do run out of brine, and for this recipe, I would suggest making a double batch of brine simply because I got to the end and I need a little bit more. So I went ahead and mixed up another half batch. But in my experience, I always need more brine. So if you're new to canning or you're thinking about preservation, just go ahead and mix up a double batch so you don't get to the point where your jars are hot, your food's hot, and everything's ready to go, and you need to mix a little bit more brine. One super handy tip on this is if you end up with extra brine at the end, you can go ahead and can it as well, as long as you have room in your canner. Once you put that canned brine on the shelf, the next time that you need to make brine or need a little bit extra, you would have a pint ready to go in the other room. So that puts you one step ahead in the overall process. Now, once everything is packed in, I left a 1/2 inch of headspace, wipe it with vinegar, and then lids and rings. You all know, if you're not new to my channel, my absolute favorite lids and rings are from 4 jars. I canned about 20 jars this specific weekend. You're not going to see everything that I did during this video because it was a lot, but I canned so many jars and every single one had a very successful seal. If you are used to using the ball lids, these just feel way heavier in your hand. So I would highly recommend you trying them out if you haven't before. I do think I have a discount code. I'll check on that. And I'll throw it down in the comments if you have not used them before. Now, the flexibility that comes along with the digital canner instead of sitting around and watching the water boil is one of my all-time favorite things. It means I'm not tied to the kitchen during the processing time. So I decided to tackle another project that's been on my to-do list all week long. This little bit is to move some of my basil seedlings that I started maybe a month ago into their new home. Now, I planted some basil this spring and put it out in my new garden beds, and it just did not like it. Immediately died. So I am planting some basil today that I can keep inside and grow all year long. We're up potting Genovese, holy, and dark opal basil into the easy self-watering herb planter box from my friends at Vigo, who just happened to be the sponsor of today's video. I picked this planter because I tend to neglect my houseplants, and this is part of the line that I've used several times before to help my plants thrive. All you have to do is water once, and the plants grow hassle-free for weeks. The little water gauge lets you know when the water is running low, which is super helpful. So I'm taking this beauty into my indoor garden where I'm setting the lights to herb so the basil will have optimal light along with optimal water on demand. The Vigo indoor garden comes with a variety of configurations, so make sure to check the link in the description for any of your gardening and potting needs. Make sure to check out the discount down below, and thank you again to my great friends at Vigo Garden, whose award-winning designs help make gardening easier for everyone, everywhere. And now it's time to grab those dilly beans out of the canner. I do have one more tip about them that I wanted to share with you. As I got to my 5th jar, I believe the recipe says it'll call for 6. That's when I realized I wasn't going to have enough brine, so I mixed up a half batch again, as I mentioned before. Now, my canner will actually hold 7 jars. So when I looked at the pile of green beans that I had, I realized I could actually fill a 7th, put it in, and then I put my 8th directly in the refrigerator. So my green bean pick for today did go ahead and yield 8 pints of green beans, and now I have a whole bunch of peppers. I have a giant Ancona, I think Incongua. I'm really butchering that. It's from rareseeds.com. I will link it down below so you can see. But those are like great big banana peppers, basically. They have the thickness and the texture of a bell pepper, and they grow way faster than a bell pepper. So we grow a few of those, and then I grow several different varieties of bell peppers along with banana peppers. Now, when you leave either of the long peppers for very long, they will eventually turn red, and they do get a little bit of heat to them. They are both listed as sweet peppers, but when they get to those red stages, they're starting to get some orange. The heat will add in, and you will have some nice flavor to develop. As a result, my kids are not going to pick those up and just snack on them. So I do mix them into other recipes that I have because I like the little bit of extra heat. They're really nice just in a fajita batch if you're using just a few, or if you want to avoid the heat altogether, just go ahead and pick them when they're yellow, and then you won't have any of those concerns. My typical plan with peppers is to dice them and freeze them or slice them up for fajita slices, which is what I did a few weeks back. But today I wanted to do something a little bit different because it'll be hard for me to move through the amount of peppers that I currently have in my freezer. So we are doing a pickled pepper and onion recipe out of the all-new Ball Big Book of Canning. It's on page 215 if you have the book. And next to it is this gorgeous picture of a Cuban sandwich that they made using this specific recipe. And since my guys like just the banana peppers on their sandwiches, I figured adding in the onions would be a new delicious recipe and an easy addition to any sandwich meal that we had coming down the pipe. Now, this recipe calls for 2 large green bell peppers, 2 medium yellow bell peppers, and 2 medium red bell peppers. Of course, you can use any color combination. What they're really going for there is a beautiful jar full of peppers. If you just have a bunch of green and you want to do it that way, it's not going to change your overall outcome, except for if you're using a red pepper like mine, which have a little bit of heat to them. Since I'm using a combination of other peppers, I decided to add a few more than the 2 of each color that it recommended, hoping that I would be able to get the full 6 pints out of this recipe. So spoiler alert, that did not happen. My traditional coming in 1 jar under happened. So I will show you what I did when I realized I wasn't going to have quite enough peppers for the recipe down the road. But I did have a little extra brine that I ended up doing another project with a little bit later. So once you get the peppers cut out, or maybe that's a problem right there. Do you see those hands? My kids cannot help themselves when they see fresh peppers cut up on the cutting board. So I had to kind of shoo him away and let him know that I had way more. I would put a ton cut up on the table for them, which is where the bulk of what you're seeing there left on the cutting board actually went. But I will say anytime that I can get my kiddos to eat fresh veggies before any processing is done to them, I always consider that a win. So anytime I'm cutting up something with peppers, I make sure there is enough for the afternoon snack. After the onions are cut, you do need to go ahead and soak them in some cold water. Now, while they are soaking, go ahead and make your brine. So this is vinegar, water, sugar, pickling salt, and dried crushed red pepper. Now, I'm just using my regular table salt that I have here at the house. This is a sea salt. It's Real Salt is the brand. So it doesn't have any extra iodized anything, no anti-caking agents or anything of the sort, which means it is safe for canning. But if you do have just a traditional table salt that you get from the store, you do want to make sure that you're not using that for canning because the anti-caking agents can interfere with your processing. So the goal with this brine is not to bring it to a boil, but to make sure that you're warming it up over a medium-high heat and stirring until your sugar is completely dissolved. Now, as that was finishing up, I went ahead and drained off the onions. The trick here is that they don't just need to be drained, but they actually need to be dry. So I am grabbing out a towel. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story about the towel. You might or might not be interested, but these are hand towels that my grandma made for me when I was a little kid and gave them to my mom to put away. At one point in my life, I was a teenager and not really paying attention, and there were a bunch of bags of my stuff, and my mom was like, hey, you need to get this. And I said, listen, I haven't used it in for years. Just go ahead and toss it. Like, I don't care. You keep it. She opened the bag and found these towels. There's a towel for every day of the week, and this is the Thursday towel that you see me using here. And every time I pull out these towels, I really think about not only the legacy and the people that have come before, and also that she would be canning some of these similar recipes back just decades ago in her own kitchen, but also the fact that as children, sometimes we just don't even understand the value of the things that we have. And I wasn't really a kid. I mean, I think I was like 18. I should have known to look inside. But at that time, all I could think was that I didn't need to store things. I didn't need the extra, and whatever it is, I'd lived just fine without for so long. But I'm really grateful today looking back that my mom opened the bag and just didn't toss the trash bag that she saw sitting around, because it is something that I enjoy, that I've been able to share with my kiddos, and that I do use on almost a daily basis. It's actually another one that I have hooked to the towel loop here on my apron. So anyway, now that I've given you a little trip down my own memory lane and shared where I almost did something I would have regretted forever, it's time to go ahead and get these jars packed. To accomplish the filling of the jars, the first thing I have to do is go ahead and drain out the water that has been warming inside my jars themselves. Since this is a boiling water recipe and not a pressure canning recipe, dumping the water directly back into the canner means that you're adding that same water temperature right back inside. So don't dump this down the drain like you would if you were pressure canning, because it is really helpful in the overall process and just a little less water that you need to add to go ahead and finish up. So into the jar, you're packing onions and peppers, leaving a 1/2 inch headspace. And I'm trying to pack these in as tightly as I can. The more you get in there, again, the less brine, but it also means less floating at the end when you're done with your recipe. So I am packing them in as tight as I can. And as I mentioned before, I did not end up filling 6 full jars. This ended up with 4 full pints plus a 1/2 pint. So always keep some smaller jar options close, especially in the case where you don't have a ton of extra brine. I could have just filled another pint with extra brine to fill up the extra space. But having those smaller jars ready and just being able to dip it directly into that warm water will bring it to temperature rather fast, especially if you're using this style canner. And then you can go ahead and just use the adequate space and the adequate jar for the amount of food going inside. Now, when I first started canning, I could not imagine why I would need to debubble something that had so much space for liquid to run all around it. But the more tightly you pack things into the jar, the more likely you are to have trapped air bubbles in there, which will impact your overall seal when those bubbles release during the canning process. And the last thing you want when you go to all the work to grow the plant from seed, harvest the food, bring it inside, and go to all the work to put it into the jar is for your seal to fail at the end because you didn't take a minute to poke around in there and loosen up any air bubbles that are inside. So I know this seems tedious or like it might not be worth it, but just make sure to do it. It really is something that you don't want to skimp on after you've gone to all of the work to put it together. Now, as you can see here, this is where my tiny jar is going to go in. The water level is not high enough to burn my fingers when I'm putting in the pints at this point. But when I'm putting in that smaller jar, I did go ahead and grab my tongs just to make sure I was gently setting it down inside. Now I'm going to take just a second here to introduce myself to anyone who might be brand new to my channel. I know it's minute 17, so if you've hung around this long, you deserve to know a little bit about me. My name is Jill. I am a homeschooling mom to 5 kiddos ages 12 to 3. My husband and I moved back to our hometown to raise our family right where we grew up. I love to garden, I love to preserve, and I love to feed my kids the healthiest food possible at the lowest prices I can find. So if that's interesting to you, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hang around. I would love to hear from you down below. Tell me what your favorite thing is to preserve and how you are working on some of these same skills maybe at your own home. Now, if you've been around for a while, you know that I have recently been having some major camera trouble. Over a month ago, I mailed off my camera on a warranty claim, thinking it would be 3 to 5 days before I had it back. And it just came back this week. Well, actually came back as a stretch. After calling them multiple times, they finally could not find it and decided to just go ahead and credit me so I could get a new one. Regardless, crisis averted. I'm back. And I thank you for sticking through all of the iPhone footage the last month. Those days are behind us. Now, during the processing time of my peppers and onions, I did go ahead and wash up the remainder of the peppers that I have here at the house. I will show you how I preserve those the next upload that I have here on Pantry to Plate. Because by the time that I got recorded my actual processing of those peppers, or I should say the ones I didn't save up for the kids, and the refrigerator cucumber recipe that has been a family recipe of ours for many, many years at this point, this video was so long that I decided the best thing to do was to pull off those 2 recipes as well as another one that I have processing for you and show you those on the next Every Little Bit Counts episode that I'll have coming out in 2 weeks. So this one, we're sticking to canning. Next week, I'm going to show you all of the ways that I preserve that are not canning. So if you're interested in some easier, quicker ways to handle some of those same items, make sure to come back because I think you'll love what I have to share. Thank you again to Jessica over at Three Rivers Homestead for putting on such a cool little challenge, because every little bit does count. If you're looking for more preserving content, make sure to watch this video right here.